name is Freyja and I'm a researcher and many other different things, and I work on AI mostly. So digital innovations, and basically what I'm doing, and where I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk about my approach, is that I've gotten increasingly frustrated with the lack of tools and the lack of ways of thinking better about what are these objects or things, or how you want to call it, what is AI that we want to regulate, whether we should regulate it, how and when. And then being educated in the legal field, we have certain legal methods that we use, but I find these to be very limited also because, of course, the results that we see in society are not what I would have expected if these were actually effective. So that kind of brought me back from industry back to doing research to figure out what are better ways that we can help policymakers make better decisions, but also industry make better decisions and civil society make better decisions. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I want us to make better decisions. So I'm exploring a lot of different methods in my research and in my work. And at the moment, I'm really interested in the question, what could possibly go wrong? I think if we apply that to anything that we are developing and doing and regulating, if we ask this question, we might be able to, in the beginning already, before it goes out of hand, to make different decisions. This conference, and I probably don't have to go into too much detail in all of the challenges that we are facing, and some of these I would argue could have been avoided if we had a better method to actually do this type of research. So what could possibly go wrong when we have actually these group of men deciding about the technology? So one of the things, of course, is a lack of representation and a lack of diversity. So on for my head, on the right hand, these vacuum cleaners, the Roombas, they were not, I have one in my home as well in Europe, and we in Europe usually don't sleep on the floor. So this Roomba is not designed to actually being able to notify when somebody's sleeping on the floor. So this is a case in South Korea where more people sleep on the floor and it got completely entangled in their head. This could have been avoided. I mean, we know the other examples that we know from facial recognition. Some of these issues that we see could have been avoided with a better and more diverse team. Another issue is, of course, what is going to happen when we implement all of these devices in our bodies. We need to think about that now, and we already see this happening. So who then controls the data? Who then controls the software when we are becoming life dependent on these technologies? A couple of years ago, there was already a case, a lawsuit against a company who made these bionic eyes. And they decided it's not relevant for us anymore to keep these updated. But people actually had this implemented in they had a bionic eye. So all of a sudden, you cannot see out of your eye anymore because the company decides no longer to support the software, right? This is only going to happen more, and I argue we need to think about that. So I use speculative design to create, for example, what you see here, like fake newsletters, or I do like a fake mock trial, really to have people to think about it a little bit differently about the things that we're doing, and to get out of this mode of, hey, I'm a regulator, all I do is regulate, or I'm a lawyer, all I do is defend my, I want to say something else, but I'll be defend my client. So yeah, what are different ways that we can think deeper? I'm not the only one. Stuart Russell, I always mix his name up, points out it very interestingly, of course, something like this, what could possibly go wrong? This could really bring down the whole industry. So it's very important for us to think about what could possibly go wrong. Okay. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. That is kind of where I'm at with my own research. So I've been trying to use the methods I know from legal studies, which is doing surveys, but there's really a lack of empirical research, and there's also a lack of getting other non-experts involved in our research. So we sit, we read a lot, we do a lot of documents, but we don't really experiment very much. That brings me to, and the other speaker already mentioned him as well, With every future we wish to create, we must first learn to imagine it. Seriously, if I ask people, what kind of future do you want? A lot of people don't have an answer to that. And that is maybe funny, but mostly very worrying if I ask this to young people, for example. They cannot imagine a better future for themselves. They cannot imagine what kind of control they can get or regain over the data that's being used or the technologies that are being put on them. Whereas if you really think about the future, anything goes. We've had COVID. All of a sudden, all of the things that people kept telling us were not possible, working from home, for example, or not taking the car to work, using a different way to go to work. It is possible. So this is kind of what helps with also, and the previous speaker also mentioned that, to challenge the narratives that we are being told by the ones that are developing this software. AI is not inevitable. We can stop. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying nobody else is going to do it. But this is a narrative that we really need to become more and more aware of if we really want to find what are the problems and what are the solutions. Again, like I said, I'm not the only one, and I find that because I'm also an artist, I know from experience that art can help you look differently, and it can really bring out some of these things that we don't question anymore. It can really make us more critical towards the things that we see. So Olaf Olliansen, for example, at the climate at one of these big climate conferences, I'm not sure if it was a conference, but to address the issues of the icebergs melting, he actually put melting icebergs on the streets there. Just, I mean, imagine standing there and actually having the physicality of what is going on instead of just sitting in a conference room, listening to a paper or seeing some numbers. Hey, the icebergs are melting. Okay, right. So another one, James Rydell, Shadow of the Drone, actually standing. So he makes outlines of drones in the actual shape of the drone and the actual format of the drone. I've been doing research on drones, I've worked on regulation of drones, but actually standing there and seeing how big something like that is, that had, to me, had a lot of impact and really changed the way I also thought about the harms and the reasons for regulating it. So I think that this is really helpful and inspiring. And of course, I have a good example in Kate Crawford's work together with Trevor Paglen, who, by showing the issues, they did a Russian roulette with ImageNet, they were able to show the biases that are actually in these data sets that a lot of our AI software was using, and nobody was questioning that. So I'm really excited about this route of research that I'm taking, but there's a lot of challenges because, of course, I'm using different disciplines. So how do you do that, right? How do you make that work? So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm asking people to imagine, I'm doing workshops, and I'm trying to figure out what are the ways that I can actually evaluate the output that I'm getting by these workshops. Because it's really great to sit together with a couple of people and imagine these scenarios, but then what? How do I implement that back into research, into recommendations, into actual policy and action? Okay, what I try to do is I've used proven methods from different disciplines. In this case, I've used causal layered analysis, which is developed by Sohail Inayatullah, who's a well-known futurist. And I combine that together with Marshall McLuhan, who uses the Tetrad. I always stumble on that. Marshall McLuhan is well known in media studies because one of his most famous sayings, I think, and you hear that a lot when people talk about AI as well. The medium is the message. I always stumble because actually it's the massage, because there was a bit of a typo in the title of his book, but he liked it because, of course, there's a double meaning there. The fact that we are using AI also means that we are changing ourselves. So what does it mean that we use, for example, now GPT for search? So what does it change, not just the search, but also what does that mean? So it's a very interesting way to go more critical about also the things that we put in the world, because what we put in the world is going to change us as well. These are two examples. So this is McLuhan again. What he does with this Tetrad is he asks 4 questions. What does this technology enhance? What does it amplify? What does it improve? What does it make obsolete? So what does it render obsolete? What does it retrieve from the past? And what does it reverse into if you push it? So if you apply this, for example, to AI, to ChatGPT or any other GPT technology, what kind of technology what does this amplify or improve? What does it render obsolete? And that's kind of how I apply it. So of course it enhances communication. You can say it retrieves the way that we become more aware of how we actually communicate, because a lot of people, of course, were incredibly surprised how well LLMs work. Actually, they thought it was much more complicated, but apparently we are just, I don't know, I'm not going to say we are stochastic parrots, but yeah. So that was really interesting. What does it reverse? Of course, we see now the impact that LLMs have on us, and there's, for example, a lot of loss of critical thinking skills, and people rely a lot on LLMs. And what does it make obsolete? I don't know, maybe Google is not going to happen anymore, or it's not going to be there like a search engine because everybody uses GPT. So what is relevant for me and valuable for me is it gives you 4 questions to ask yourself every time you have a new technology, and allows you a structure to think. So the other one is Ineatulan, causal layer analysis. This is really interesting to apply because it asks us to go deeper. It asks us not to stay at the litany and the systemic causes level, but really also to challenge the worldviews and the myths and the metaphors. And this is something we now, for example, see when I started to look more on AI. We were in competition with China. We were in competition with other countries to develop an LLM or even an AI or an AGI. You see the shift in narratives, right? So right now we're talking nowhere and war. If we are not going to do it, we have to do it because otherwise they will do it. So you see the narrative has changed. And that is very interesting because this is also influencing the way we are willing to regulate, the way we are willing to invest. I mean, a lot of the discourse is now also about military AI, whereas a lot of companies were not willing to have their models used for military purposes. That is changing. That is changing in their terms of services. That's changing in their contracts. So what is then also interesting from this model is also because it's challenging us and it makes us more aware about the metaphors that are being used and the influences that has. To give you an example, for example, if you talk about AI is out of the box. It's the genie, it's out of the box. You hear that in discussions and then they say, oh my God, no, we have to put the genie back into the box. So they try to figure out and they imagine or they frame AI as something negative, right? Whereas if you take it differently, this narrative, or you use another narrative or another metaphor, you can also imagine a genie. That means I get questions. I can ask questions and anything goes. So this type of framing in a discussion, I may sound like I think this is all funny. I do think this is all funny, but it is incredibly serious because, of course, in these policy discussions that we are having about what kind of regulation we need to have, what needs to be regulated, when and how, this also influences them. So this also influences the people who are going to decide whether or not we, for example, now should, we have the GDPR in Europe, right? The privacy regulation. They are talking now, we need to have it less strict because it is limiting innovation. So we are on the one hand now being influenced by the narrative that we need to have more AI. We need to have more tools. This is again a little bit of the list. So if I combine them together, we have 4x4 16 questions that really make us more aware and question and think harder, imagine harder about the technologies that we are being presented with, the companies, the different stakeholders, and how they are representing it. And it makes us just better at making more well-informed discussions and decisions. I think I'm losing track of time a little bit. I put it in a beautiful template so we can actually apply it to whatever topic you want to apply it to. So this is the applied CLTA, again, to LLMs. You can figure out, I'm not going to go through it because I'd love to have some time for questions. Yeah, you answer the questions, you can go from up and down, left to right. So basically, what is the problem? What are the causes? Then what are the worldviews? What do people actually think? Because that influences, of course, what kind of directions they want to do, what kind of solutions they want to take. What kind of myths do we hear about AI that we need to challenge? What kind of metaphors and how are they influencing people's worldviews? Because metaphors are incredibly powerful. And this is really one way that we can also challenge worldviews. And then if we go to Marshall McLuhan, you can figure out what does this AI actually is? What is this thing that we want to regulate or that we want to discuss? So what does it do? What does it enhance? What does it make obsolete? There's no judgment in here. It's just a way to get as much information and have your imagination going. Yeah, really briefly, discussion about the strengths and the challenges. Like I said, it really challenges your narrative. It really opens your mind, makes you more aware of what people are saying, at what level are they entering the discussion, where do they need to be challenged. Questions of power, of course. I mean, who is deciding about AI? Who is developing it? I work on open source versus closed software, for example. So you hear the arguments from both sides of which one is worse and which one is more prone to abuse, for example, and it's really important to check who is saying what. It goes beyond the binaries. I've worked on smart cities. We cannot have safety when we also have privacy. So if you want to be safe, you're going to have surveillance cameras everywhere. I, of course, challenge this binary. Can we not imagine harder? Well, we have both. Support human decision making and participatory governance by using these type of methods, and especially also speculative design. We take it out of the expert, we take it out of the academia, and we bring it and we get people together to imagine what could possibly go wrong, and also what kind of futures do we want. Because if we don't even know that, if we don't agree on that, it's really easy to stay on this slippery slope that we are actually on at the moment. But it's really complex, and it's really challenging also to translate this into practice and actions. So we have these AI summits, for example, beautiful reports. We have these AI policy reports from every country. I mean, Greece now, I've read their AI policy for Greece. They want to be the leader in AI. Fantastic. Show me how you're going to do that. And then we don't really see that very much.